evidence-informed practice, advancing local evidence ecosystems in Germany's public health service. May I invite you, dear Mrs. Candidate, to present a summary in layman's language of your study and the conclusions of your thesis.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Just give me a second so I can share my screen. So, thank you, Pro-Rector, dear Chair, dear esteemed members of the opposition, dear esteemed promoters and co-promoter, and dear colleagues, family and friends watching online. Good morning and welcome. In the following presentation, I will provide a summary of my PhD thesis. Oh, just a second, I'll need to. Entitled Capacity Building Approaches for Evidence-Informed Practice in Public Health Services. So why did the public health service capture my interest? Health and well-being are strongly shaped by the living and working conditions in our communities. And many major health gains of the past century were achieved through population-based measures by addressing the underlying environmental, societal, and political determinants of health. Delivering such measures requires coordinated governmental action, which is a core mandate of public health services. And municipalities. 16 state-specific health laws define the regulatory framework, and more than 370 local health authorities are responsible for carrying out essential public health operations. Within this federal structure, local health authorities are, well, at least in theory, well positioned to identify local needs and align them with measures that protect and promote community health. However, being well positioned is not the same as being well equipped, and local health authorities make decisions every day under limited resources and with substantial uncertainty about the effectiveness and efficacy of measures. This is where evidence-informed decision-making becomes essential. It ensures that measures are guided by the best available evidence, while considering aspects such as equity, feasibility, affordability, sustainability, and even acceptability. The COVID-19 pandemic revealed how difficult this is in practice. Local health authorities had to adapt state-level regulations to rapidly changing local conditions. Yet they often lack the capacity to do so in an evidence-informed way. And these issues persist today due to limited research directly relevant for local practice and the absence of structured translation of knowledge. And this reflects a persistent gap between academia and practice within Germany's public health service that needs to be addressed. The goal hereby is not to turn health authorities into research institutions, but to bridge the academia practice gap by establishing bilateral knowledge translation and exchange structures. A local evidence ecosystems offer a suitable framework to institutionalize this exchange by linking evidence generation with evidence utilization. Yet, implementing such ecosystems in Germany remains difficult due to persistent workforce shortages, fragmented structures for evidence-informed decision-making, and insufficient institutional capacities for knowledge translation and exchange. So these challenges formed the starting point of my dissertation, which asked how can local evidence ecosystems be developed and strengthened in Germany's public health service. And to address this question, my thesis focused on 3 areas of investigation. First, I assessed which factors hinder or support collaboration between academia and practice, and I analyzed why it is so difficult to recruit and retain a well-qualified public health service workforce. Based on these findings, I identified key fields of activity at the academia-practice interface and developed approaches for conceptualizing training programs that equip public health professionals with the competencies needed for effective knowledge translation and exchange. And finally, in the third step, I pilot implemented a capacity building approach in practice. The dissertation employed a participatory action-oriented mixed method approach based on 2 complementary research projects, the ÖGD Study Survey and the Evidence ÖGD project. A range of qualitative and quantitative methods was integrated and organized into 3 sequential steps First, 2 mixed method online surveys, qualitative interviews, and a scoping review were conducted to identify workforce challenges, as well as barriers and facilitators of academia-practice collaboration. The resulting findings were then discussed in a stakeholder workshop, where predefined tasks and activities were critically appraised and existing training programs assessed. All results were triangulated and synthesized into a toolbox for developing KTE, or knowledge translation and exchange training programs. And finally, this toolbox was applied in a participatory action research study to pilot implement a trainee rotation model within a local academia practice collaboration in Germany's public health service at the local level. So what emerged as essential for strengthening the connection between academia and public health service practice? Based on a total of 23 key expert interviews, we identified a broad variety of enabling and hindering factors of collaboration, which were categorized based on the COM-B model of behavior change. 10 key barriers emerged, and they included capability-related aspects, here highlighted in orange, for example, such as limited human resources and gaps in competencies. The key barriers also included opportunity-related aspects, which you can see in green, for example, bureaucratic and technical hurdles, weak networks, or misaligned operational modes. And finally, the key barriers also included motivational aspects, here highlighted in blue, such as imbalanced incentives, a lack of an evidence-informed culture within the local public health service, or limited recognition between academia and practice. Fortunately, there were also 35 corresponding facilitators. And because many of the facilitators addressed multiple barriers simultaneously, they were conceptualized as some kind of a spinning wheel around the barrier core, illustrating how supportive mechanisms, such as, for example, dedicated research time or skill-based recruitment strategies or on-the-job training approaches, can mitigate several barriers at once. And overall, conflicting system logics and a supportive management emerged as overarching criteria that underscored the need to recognize, first of all, the differing logics of academia and practice, and the importance of leadership that proactively supports evidence-informed practice. The public health service attractiveness as a potential employer, on the other hand, was examined in 2 cross-sectional mixed method surveys, with more than 3,000 students conducted right before and during the COVID-19 pandemic. The surveys explored the students' general knowledge about public health and the public health service in particular, and their perceptions on the public health service as a workplace. And overall, the findings revealed limited interest in public health service careers, especially among medical students, while students from public health and related fields expressed somewhat higher interest. However, knowledge about the public health service was generally low in medical and non-medical study programs. And both surveys highlighted key factors influencing whether young professionals consider the public health service as an employer. Students valued, for example, work-life balance, job stability, and preventive population-oriented focuses of the public health service. At the same time, they identified administrative workload, rigid bureaucracy, and outdated structures as major deterrents. So the key takeaway is that visibility efforts alone, for example, through nationwide campaigns or something comparable, will not be sufficient to strengthen the public health service appeal. Instead, to improve the employability, it is important to focus on targeted recruitment, a better integration of public health service content or relevant content into curricula of the universities, for example. And finally, we have to invest in a systematic administrative modernization structure and processes. So building on this assessment, it was time to develop ideas how to actually bridge the gap between academia and public health service practice. And this was done in Chapter 5 by defining the academia practice interface and developing a methodology to conceptualize training programs. Based on a scoping review of existing training programs and key informant interviews, relevant tasks and activities for working at the academia-practice interface in Germany's public health service were identified. The findings were triangulated and critically appraised in a stakeholder workshop with more than 40 participants and resulted in a set of relevant fields of activities you can see on the right side of the slide. Building on these insights, we developed the Evidence ÖGD toolbox as a generic instrument for program development. And this toolbox comprises in total 4 core elements: content and context-specific considerations, guidance for selecting an appropriate training format, and elements that are relevant for ongoing program refinement, for example, evaluation strategies or dissemination approaches. Each core element is accompanied by guiding questions that support program developers in designing training programs in knowledge translation and exchange that are tailored to their needs and circumstances. Additionally, a 7-step guidance was designed to support these program developers in applying the toolbox. And this guidance is visually depicted in this figure. It walks users through different recommended steps, ranging from, on the left side, forming, for example, a core development team in the initiation phase, to defining dissemination strategies or ensuring future transferability of the developed program in the final advancement phase on the right side. So, with the assessment and the toolbox in place, the final step was to move from design to application by conceptualizing and pilot implementing a knowledge translation and exchange capacity building approach in Chapter 6. And this was done in a participatory action research approach in which the local health authority located in Düsseldorf, the Heinrich Heine University, and the Academy of Public Health Services jointly developed and piloted a tailored knowledge translation and exchange trainee rotation model. This process followed the stepwise guidance provided in the Evidence ÖGD toolbox in Chapter 5. And the resulting model was a 6-month trainee rotation program, which included structured mentoring, seminar series, and a joint trainee research project to strengthen skills and competencies in knowledge translation and exchange at both individual as well as institutional levels. Trainees and mentors were supported by a predefined competency framework, which included a catalog of learning objectives and also had a guiding program manual nearby. The pilot revealed important lessons, including, for example, the need for flexibility in response to time and resources. And we collected all these insights, and they informed program refinement, which resulted in an adapted version of the trainee rotation model, which you can see on the right side of the slide. And this adapted model is currently scaled up by the Academy of Public Health Services by providing open access program materials, training, and consultation for interested municipalities. So, taking all the experiences gained during this dissertation into account, 3 overarching recommendations can be derived. To advance local evidence ecosystems in Germany's public health service, it is important to strengthen the public health service workforce, for example, through competency-oriented recruitment strategies, targeted training, and long-term workforce development strategies. But it's also important to build institutional opportunities, including or based on supportive leadership, modernized administrative structures, and integrated knowledge translation and exchange processes. And most importantly, we have to invest in academia practice partnerships by fostering intrinsic as well as extrinsic motivation to establish sustainable structures for evidence-informed practice and evidence-informed decision-making. So, of course, I have to acknowledge that while this dissertation has several strengths, it also has some methodological limitations. Let me start with the strength. The work applied various methods and integrated diverse data sources, which strengthened the robustness and depth of findings. Active stakeholder engagement throughout the process ensured continual refinement and strong real-world practicability and relevance. And in addition, the work placed a clear emphasis on transparency, including open access publications and adherence to open data principles. However, there were limitations. Despite broad recruitment strategies, some selection bias cannot be ruled out, as for example, the topic might have attracted participants with heightened interest in public health in general or the public health service in particular. The data collection relied largely on self-administered instruments, and the participatory approach we chose already, well, it was well suited for co-developing and piloting practice-oriented solutions. It also encountered structural constraints such as differing institutional logics, limited time and resource shortages, which slowed parts of the development process. And finally, much of the research was conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic, which may have influenced perceptions and could affect the timeliness and generalizability of some findings. So the findings of this work have but already achieved impact. The ÖGD study survey generated the largest dataset on date on career interest among future public health professionals and informed a federal campaign to strengthen Germany's public health service. The dissertation produced 2 adaptable tools, which offer practical guidance for public health professionals, and its insights were disseminated widely through peer-reviewed publications, conferences, and even within some keynote lectures, and they have also contributed to political guiding documents. Looking ahead, capacity building and collaboration are essential to strengthen public health governance. The next step is to scale and adapt the approaches developed in this dissertation across Germany and beyond. And the tools, insights, and models created here are ready for use by municipalities and academic partners to advance evidence-informed practice where it matters most, in the communities where people live and work. And hereby, I would like to thank you very much for your time and attention, and I give the word back to the Pro-Rector.
Vielen Dank. Thank you for your clear presentation, Mrs. Candidate. Sometimes the internet connection has some hiccups, so I would advise that you seek such a place that the internet strength of your machine is as strong as possible, but perhaps do not panic, stay where you are, and if you don't understand us, please raise your hand. The opposition will be opened by the chair of your assessment committee, and the first opponent in this degree committee, Professor Chabanovska, and she is a chair in public health leadership and workforce development at Maastricht University. Professor Chabanovska.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, first of all, thank you for your presentation and for your thesis, which I have read with great interest as it provides a lot of good results and information, which are in line with many international studies, especially those carried out in the US, concerning the employability of the public health workforce. Congratulations to you and to your promotion team. I would like to start with my first question, which relates to the first article. I would like to ask why you have not included the essential public health services or functions framework to discuss the results, which really, I think, can be very well reflected and supported by the public health services framework when you talk about the collaboration or gaps in the collaboration between the practice and academia. And there are some aspects that might be helpful, while you also mention this framework in Article 3. So were there any reasons, or if you did, how would it change?
Thank you very much for your kind words, highly esteemed opponent, and your question. So if I understood your question correctly, you were wondering why I did not choose to argue or consider the discussion based on the essential public health operations, which were mentioned several times within the dissertation. Yes, okay. So the essential public health operations were very important for the underlying construction of the whole thesis. However, for chapter 2, which was identifying barriers and facilitators between academia and practice, in particular within the German public health service, the model so the COM-B model of capabilities, opportunities, and motivational aspects, appeared more feasible in terms of our research question. However, we acknowledge, and I acknowledge, that the essential public health operations are very important and quite helpful for conceptualizing, for example, the competency-based learning objectives, which underlied the trainee rotation model, which was developed in chapter 5 or constructed in chapter 5 and applied in chapter 6. So it was used several times, but for the underlying construct, we chose to go for the COM-B model suggested by Susan.
If I may ask one more question in the same direction, specifically, the essential public health function number 7, which is the development of the public health workforce, competent public health workforce, seems to be a link, the perfect link, and also interpretation of can help in the interpretation of the results of the study. So have you considered this function as the major area of collaboration between practice and academia? And would it have been useful?
So thank you very much for your follow-up question. Indeed, we did not consider the essential public health function of workforce development, so the 7th one, within the part of this study, but the essential public health functions are currently the baseline of the development of a new curriculum, which is happening at the Academy of Public Health Services right now, which is kinda, but not in total, some kind of a follow-up project where we developed the trainee rotation program. It's more like, it's an additional project we are currently working on in the Public Health Academy, or the Academy of Public Health Services, to say, to develop a new curriculum, especially for non-medical professionals within the public health services in Germany.
Thank you very much. And my next question is just curiosity. In the barriers and facilitators, you include knowledge, skills, and competencies. What is the reason for including knowledge, skills, and competencies?
Thank you very much for your question. So if I got your question right, you're focusing on the KTE framework, which is part of chapter 2. Sure, we developed it in chapter 2. And you're talking about the second barrier we identified, which we labeled knowledge, skills, and competencies. Is this right? Yes. And the name and the sum up of the whole barrier area is mostly due to the translation in German language. So Wissen, Kompetenzen und Fähigkeiten. And it's a broader category where we found within the interviews and within the discussion we undertook with the study participants, that they explained that there is a lot of underlying knowledge important to understand both systems, the academia system as well as the public health service system. And there are several skills you need to develop during your training program. However, only focusing on skills and knowledge you're gaining was not enough to overcome this barrier. So to conceptualize an actual training program, we decided to go for a competency-based skill acquirement, which is why we broadened this category in total.
Thank you for your explanation. And if I have time, I can ask. All right. So my final question is concerning the same article. You talk very nicely about the transferability in your discussion, the transferability of the results, and you mention what results can be transferred, but I wonder how the transferability has been assured in your method section.
So thank you very much for your question. So if I got your question right, you are wondering how I would assess the transferability of findings?
Not assess. What you have done in the method section methodologically to assure that your results can be transferred to other contexts.
Okay, thank you. And focusing, if I may ask, focusing on chapter 2, so the development of the knowledge translation and exchange.
Still in the same chapter.
Okay, so great. So we choose key informant interviews, in total with 24 experts in 23 interviews. And the participants had a broad background, mainly focused and part of the public health service, because that was the main topic of the research, but also in total 8 participants had an international perspective and expertise. Some of them also in combination, so an international expertise, for example, from a foreign country, and to some content also they worked for several years within the public health service in Germany, but several did not work in the German system, so they widened our perspective. So their particular answers regarding the whole barriers and facilitators they had within their own systems and also the German system were really important to develop an idea of how important are the specifics we found within the discussion for the German system, but also beyond the German system. So I think by broadening the perspectives and broadening the participant range, we had a good baseline to assure transferability to other systems and contexts.
Thank you very much, dear candidate. I give the voice back to the prorector.
The opposition will be continued by Emeritus Professor Janssen. Her expertise is population health, and she is affiliated with Maastricht University. Professor Janssen.
Dear candidate, thank you for your very clear presentation and your very relevant research into collaboration between policy, practice and research. You identified the barriers, the facilitators, and you also looked at the attractiveness of public health as an employer. You developed a training program and pilot tested it. All in all, you have thoroughly conducted this research, and I would like to congratulate you with the results and with the doctoral thesis. And I would also like to share these compliments with your doctoral team. As you may know, I did more or less the same research in the Netherlands. So I have a few questions, especially about the use of the COM-B, the behavior model, determined more or less by motivation, opportunity, and capacity. And you found 35 facilitators and 10 barriers. Despite the disbalance between the numbers, 35 and 10, there are very tough hurdles. Can you reflect on this? Because so many facilitators, but still the collaboration is very difficult.
Thank you, highly esteemed opponent, for your kind words and also for your question and raising the imbalance between the numbers of the key barriers and facilitators. I would like to add that the model I presented, it was only a part I presented within the slides, and you can see the whole model within the dissertation. I think it's figure 2 or something like this. So it's in the beginning of the thesis. I would have to look it up if I get the number right. But due to visualizing that the facilitators are more or less focusing on several barriers at once, we did choose this kind of spinning wheel approach. And therefore, we had to reduce complexity within the model. And we focused on the 10 key barriers. But also, we identified several sub-barriers. I do not know the total number by heart, but you can find the sub-barriers separately by each table. So we have the key barriers, then we have several sub-barriers, and then we have additional facilitators, which match to some content and some extent the barriers and the sub-barriers, but they are more broadened in terms of the matching part. So the barriers are more complex than presented in the figure 2 within the thesis.
Yeah. And what do you think about the accounting mechanisms of policy, practice, and research? Because each of these sectors have their own accounting mechanisms. For instance, policy should primarily ensure political stability. Research is primarily driven by high scientific ambition and to be published in peer-reviewed international journals. And practice has a main focus on finding very quick solutions in daily practice. How does it affect the collaboration possibilities?
Thank you very much. I think this affects the collaboration possibilities in a severe grade. So we have to consider the two systems within their own logic. So the system of practice and the system of academia. And if we are thinking about ways to bridge the gap between these two systems, for example, by investing in capability approaches with a trainee rotation approach we just piloted within the dissertation, or something comparable, that there are several other really good opportunities to think about how to bridge this gap. We also have to learn to acknowledge and get to know each other's system, which is quite important. And therefore, we identified the conflicting system logics as meta barriers. So if we don't know the underlying structures, mechanisms, policies, and even ways to think and to conduct their own work of academia and practice, it might be really challenging to work together and to engage in knowledge translation and exchange.
Yes, okay, thank you for your answer. I have another question about the use of the CAMB model, as I said. Did you also look at the interrelationships between opportunity, motivation, and capacity? Because I can imagine that if you are not motivated, you're also not keen to look at any opportunity that might come up somewhere. So did you look at the interrelationships between the capacity, the opportunity, and the motivation? And what effect it has on the behavior?
Thank you very much for that question. We discussed this theme or this interconnectedness of the different barriers, as well as facilitators several times. We were also considering highlighting it within the model by dashed arrows, for example, but then nothing was readable in the end. So it was too highly interconnected. So because everything was mainly driven by the underlying motivation of the individual, but particular as well by the motivation of the institutions. So we had this problem that there were a lot of interconnected layers between the three parts. So the capability part, the opportunity part, and the motivation part, but we did not analyze them in particular, but it came up within the interviews and also within the stakeholder workshops in the other part of the study, for example.
Okay, so you need anyway. You saw the interconnectedness between the capability, opportunity, and motivation, but it was not really analyzed in a quantitative way.
No.
Okay, thank you for the answer. What does supportive leadership mean in this model? Because I saw on page 39 in the spinning wheel that it's a very important aspect. What do you think about that?
Yes, thank you very much for that question. So the supportive leadership is some kind of an underlying meta facilitator. Without supportive leadership, it would be mostly impossible to engage in any kind of knowledge translation and exchange on an individual base, and particular on an institutional base. So the supportive leadership emerged as that kind of facilitator that was essential and necessary to engage on any level.
Can it be helpful as a boundary spanner? Because I saw in chapter 6 you mentioned that the trainee rotation program is a very important boundary spanner. Boundary spanners are needed to build the bridge. What does supportive leadership? What does it mean in this aspect?
Thank you. I think in this aspect, it would not only be helpful, it would be essential. So I think you need the supportive leadership to get an actual mandate for engagement and also to conduct research or to engage in knowledge translation and exchange.
Okay, do we have time for one question? Short
Perhaps
question?
we can give the word to the external partners, and if we have more time, we come back to you, Professor Jan.
Yes, okay. I give the voice back to the prorector. Thank you.
So we're very pleased that Professor Pruskel is present. She's professor for the EGD at the Brandenburg Medical School in Brandenburg, I presume. Professor Pruskel.
Thank you very much. So, dear candidate, dear Laura, thank you very much for the clear presentation of your findings. I think your dissertation makes a relevant contribution to the academic knowledge, especially or particularly in the German public health service. And at this point, I would like to address 3 aspects that I believe are particularly relevant for the practical implementation and scientific classification of your work going forward. So you present a context-sensitive training model for strengthening evidence-informed practice. And considering the typical resource constraints, especially now in the local public health service in Germany, which elements of your training model are essential for broad implementation? And where do you see the greatest scope for simplification or adaptation to enable scalability?
So thank you, first of all, for this kind question, highly esteemed opponent. So if I got your question correctly, you are interested in what elements of the developed training program were essential for scaling up and which were, for example, more part of discussion, so to scale it down a little bit in times of scarce resources. Okay, so I think the training program we developed was quite unique for the context of the research collaboration conducted and placed in Düsseldorf. So Düsseldorf is a local health authority, it's an urban region. And as I told at the beginning of the presentation, we have this 377 local health authorities, and we have a huge heterogeneity in the underlying constructs and basements of the federal or the formal regulations, but also on the resources that are having. And therefore, we aimed for a capacity building approach that is adaptable to different varieties and settings. And I think the program might be more or less transferable in a similar way to other contexts comparable to Düsseldorf. So large-scale health authorities, communities where there is, for example, already maybe a collaboration between academia and practice in the local health authority area. But if it comes to more rural areas or less resource-equipped local health authorities, we have to make some adaptations. We have to scale it down. We have to even maybe get rid of some of the parts of the trainee rotation model just to start collaborating in some kind of collaboration work. So a pragmatic solution would be, first of all, to use the KTE framework we developed within I developed within the dissertation to assess the underlying criteria of resources and barriers. And then it would be possible to identify opportunities which are essential to engage in capacity building approaches. And with this baseline assessment, it would be quite helpful to use the toolbox, which was developed as well as a conceptualization approach to engage in capacity building approaches, and then to highlight what are the essential elements, for example, of the trainee rotation program that are most suitable for the rural setting or for the specific context we're interested to engage with in new approaches. So to wrap up, I would start with identifying barriers and facilitators in the area, and then I would proceed with adapting, for example, the trainee rotation model we just piloted and focusing on the most important parts. And the most important part can be, if there is only a really low resource setting in a rural health authority, to think about if it's really important to rotate, for example, between academia and practice, or if it's also possible to start with much smaller effort, for example, by investing in journal clubs or starting with research projects with a university, or not only in a one-on-one collaboration, but also, for example, in a rotation between different health authorities, or even consider rotating to health authorities on a state level as well. So make the best out of your resources, I would suggest.
Thank you. And against this backdrop, now kind of in particular, how important do you consider the already mentioned heterogeneity of the local health authorities? For example, in terms of size, equipment, and research tradition. And what is your assessment of the potential role of the local teaching and research health authorities, the Lehrgesundheitsämter, or that's kind of, it's the term in German, in the further development of the local evidence ecosystem?
Yep, thank you very much for the follow-up question. So with the academia health authorities, or the Lehr- und Forschungsgesundheitsämter, this is a quite interesting approach which just started to be implemented within the German public health service context. I think there are at the moment one I know definitely, and there are two others that are under development right now. And the construct is that there is a local health authority that is especially focusing on conducting research and engaging in research collaborations with academia. And this is a concept which is quite unique because it is new, developed in Germany. I think there are approaches in other countries where it's already well established and also evaluated in other countries. For example, in the US, there are some evaluation studies. And this is a nice opportunity to think about embedding some kind of a trainee rotation within this concept, because they already have another infrastructure compared, for example, to a rural district where there is just not any nearby academia institute. So it would be really helpful to think about collaboration between the health authorities or the research health authorities and embedding some kind of a trainee rotation model within that.
Thank you. And as a final question, I would like to address the issue of how the findings of your work can actually find their way into the decision-making process. So how can we ensure that this knowledge transfer is institutionalized rather than tied to individuals?
Thank you very much. I think this is a challenging question. I think one of the main challenges in this question is how to actually convince decision makers and policymakers about the benefits of the approach, because we just talked about the importance of leadership. We also talked about the importance of knowing the underlying system logics of both sides. So we have to convince the decision makers that are actually focusing on implementing or that are in a position that they can enable knowledge translation and exchange processes. They need to be convinced that there is an actual gain by investing in these kind of collaborations. So I think we have to demonstrate the benefits of collaboration between academia and practice, but also we have to think about how to convince decision makers about the benefits in investing in evidence-informed decision-making and evidence-based practice in general. So maybe there's also a need to discuss how to prove the population-wide gain of evidence-informed decision-making. And, for example, what are the benefits regarding potential cost reductions in the future if we focus on prevention strategies? And I think this is something that is on us to prove the benefits, to prove and to conceptualize the importance of evidence-informed decision-making, but also on evidence-based practice. And with this in mind, we can also go a step further and actually conceptualize studies that focusing on the evaluation part of these models.
Thank you very much. So I hand back.
The opposition will be continued by Professor Ray Fuss. She's Chair Public Health and Health Services Research at LMU Munich in Germany. Thank you for being present, Professor.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, I was very impressed with both the quality of your written work and the clarity of your oral presentation. So thank you very much for that. And I would like to congratulate both you and your promoting team with regards to the breadth, depth, and quality of the research you've done. I would like to focus on later sections of your thesis and my questions. So my first question relates to chapter 5, where you present this comprehensive toolbox for conceptualizing integrated training programs at the interface between academia and the public health service. And you use key informed interviews in Germany, a scoping review relating to 5 EU countries, and a multi-professional stakeholder workshop to develop this. Now, this toolbox was specifically developed for Germany or for use in Germany, but I would like to know about the international transferability of this. So specifically, which contextual factors may affect the usefulness and the application of this toolbox in countries beyond Germany?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your kind words and your question. So regarding the transferability of the developed toolbox in chapter 5, the toolbox and the elements included in the toolbox were largely based on a scoping review. And the scoping review that was conducted with a focus on the 5 European countries, mostly for comparable reasons for the public health service system. But they also enabled us to identify elements beyond the German scope. So there are a lot of elements, part of the toolbox, that led to the development, for example, of the guiding questions that help program developers to actually apply the toolbox. And these elements were based on these findings of the scoping review. And as they were also from an international perspective, so I think the majority of studies was within these 5 country considerations, they are also applicable beyond the German scope. We focused on the public health service, but the elements we extracted are transferable to public health systems that are in a similar way constructed, so in a federal structure.
Could you maybe just give a couple of examples on contextual factors that may play a key role? So you looked at UK examples, or you included the UK in your scoping review, as well as Germany, the Netherlands, and so on. But the UK public health system is quite different from the German public health system, for example. So just a couple of examples to illustrate would be nice.
Yes. So regarding the contextual factors, we focused mostly on elements that are relevant to define program objectives and goals. And we also focused on aspects that are relevant to increased stakeholder buy-in and investment, but both on the side on the developers, as well as on the teachers' side, as well as on the participant side. And we focused on essential resources that are mentioned within the literature, but also by the participants of the interviews, for example, and finally then in the wrap-up phase during the stakeholder workshops. And also we discussed quite intensely within the interviews and the workshop phase the relevant settings and resources that are needed to conceptualize a capacity building approach.
Okay. My next question relates to figure 15 in your discussion, where you describe very nicely this evidence ecosystem comprising bridge positions, academia, practice partnerships, and knowledge transfer projects. You already talked earlier about these conflicting system logics between academia and the public health service. So my question is, if you engage at the interface as an individual, for example, as a knowledge broker, at what cost does this come? What are the disadvantages to the individual? I think we all agree on the benefits, hopefully, but what are the disadvantages?
Thank you very much on this question. So the figure you're referring to is the figure where I try to visualize the idea of bridging the academia practice gap in different approaches. So with the bridge positions, the partnerships, as well as the knowledge translation products and dissemination products. And when it comes to the not so great sides of working at the intersection, I think it's depending on the intersection in particular we are working on. So if we're thinking about a knowledge broker position, for example, embedded within the German public health service, you always have to consider two sides. So you have to think about what kind of bridging position are you currently fulfilling? Is it a bridging between public health practice and policy? Or is it a bridging position between public health practice and academia? Or is it bridging between all three of them? Then you have to learn to speak languages that are relevant for all of three systems. So you have to disseminate information in an adequate way between these different systems. So you have to always be careful in tailoring your message and getting all the important informations from everyone. So you always have to be an expert in networking, taking into account all the different perspectives, and always have to be quite precise in the work you're actually doing. So I think the nice part is that you're actually getting a perception of impact with your work, but on the other side, it comes to a highly intense workload and costs that you have to contribute to all the different systems you're bridging.
Yeah, I think the workload is a key issue, and you still need to meet the criteria of each sector. So in academia, you need to produce the peer-reviewed publications, you're valued against that, and the public health service, you need to deliver on your core functions, and so there's a clash. One last question, but I'll be brief, and it would be great if you could also be brief. In your conclusions, you make the following statement: the effectiveness of institutionalized KTE structures must be critically evaluated. Of course, I agree with the need for evaluation. In a few sentences, how would you set up such an evaluation?
Okay, thank you for your question. So assessing such an evaluation could be, for example, comparing different municipalities where they have different capacity building approaches or KTE approaches in place. And then trying to, for example, in some kind of a natural experiment, to compare the different structures implemented. So that would be something that is not that much resource intensive, because it would be already in place, but it would be, of course, challenging to account for all potential co-funding variables that are in place. So that might be something that could be easily be conducted within the next few years.
Thank you very much. And with this, I will hand back to the pro-rector.
The opposition will be continued by the last member of the assessment committee, Dr. Alutis, and he is working in Cologne at the Federal Institute of Public Health. So he's the most near Maastricht opponent. Dr. Alutis.
Thank you very much. Dear candidate, liebe Frau Arnold, likewise, I would like to congratulate you to a very interesting dissertation. the thesis is not just interesting from an academic point of view, but also very useful for policymakers and public health practitioners. And I will make sure to take this back to my organization in Cologne. I really enjoyed reading it, but I also have a few questions, if I may. You write in your dissertation that the Pakt für den ÖGD, this National Pact for Public Health Services, offers a critical window of opportunity for the further implementation of evidence-informed decision-making. And you mentioned in your dissertation multiple times that ensuring sustainable financing is critical throughout. However, the pact financing, as you know, expires at the end of 2026. So as it currently seems, the outlook with regards to financing for public health is bleak. Budgets are being cut. Municipalities are scrambling to get by. So in the light of your thesis, how should local health authorities and also academia respond to this environment of budget cuts? We're entering an era of austerity. And how can we still strengthen evidence-informed decision-making with those constraints?
Thank you very much, highly esteemed opponent, for your kind words and your question as well. So if I got your question correctly, you want to discuss options and possibilities, how to still try to get local health authorities engaged in evidence-informed decision-making and evidence-based practice in times of austerity and financial constraints. So I'm still convinced that the Public Health Service Pact was a window of opportunity, which enabled several developments that were important. For example, the newly gained attraction of the public health service in general, but also the starting point of several important research projects that were financed during that phase. However, as you just mentioned, the pact is ending next year in 2026, and it's very likely not to be continued at the moment. So there will be not any further pact for the ÖGD. So we have to think about different opportunities to still get local health authorities, not only on the local level, also health authorities on the state level and on the national level, engaged in evidence-informed decision-making processes. And I think the trainee program we developed within the evidence ÖGD study is one way. It's not the most resource lowest version, but it also is some kind of an resource scarce approach by, for example, rotating between different institutions. So the trainees that rotated between the local health authority and the university in Düsseldorf and the Academy of Public Health Services, they all were already employed at these institutions. So they did not have to get an additional payment because it was more like a turning around of staff during these institutions. And this is still, of course, labor intense. And we need someone who is mentoring the trainees. So we have to invest to some kind, but it's not that we have to invest for 3-year full positions, for example. So then it's more like an approach where we can just slightly start getting to know the different systems. So I think it's an approach that might be feasible, especially for the bigger local health authorities. We discussed the issue for the lower health authorities a few minutes ago, where we maybe need another approach. So I think investing in innovative capacity building approaches is one way, but there are also several other ways. So your background is the Bundesinstitut für öffentliche Gesundheit. So we have an authority on the national level, which is maybe a really helpful institution that could provide evidence-based guidelines for the work on the local level. So thinking about different levels within the German Public Health Service would be essential to develop an idea how to strengthen the evidence-informed base within the Public Health Service in Germany, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you very much. And you've addressed the different levels. You've addressed the national level and the local level. What role do you ascribe to the regional public health authorities? They are also huge, very large institutions, for instance, in Bavaria or North Rhine-Westphalia. Do they not need to ensure that evidence-based decision-making is being done in the municipalities?
Thank you for this question. I'm not sure if they have to make sure that evidence-informed practice is happening on the local level, but they are in a position where they could act as major facilitators for engagement in the evidence-informed approaches. So by delivering guidelines, supporting with, for example, data analysis, data collection, and to some extent, that might be some supportive measurements they can do.
Hora est.
You might finish your sentence, but I think you already reached the point where some conclusions can be made, and Dr. Alutis and you can certainly find a period in time to further discuss this matter. So, Laura Arnold, the time allotted for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now virtually withdraw into another breakout room to discuss the quality of your thesis and of your defense and of your lay question. And I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return. I hope she's still there. No. Laura Arnold. I hope you can hear me. The degree committee here present online has assessed the quality of your thesis and of your beautiful defense. Some people want to use your PowerPoints as an implementation tool to further implement your thoughts in the whole of Germany. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to grant you the degree of doctor. Professor Brandt is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. And he will also take a declaration of scientific integrity from you. So you have to agree to that, because otherwise we cannot give you the certificate. I invite your supervisor now to take the floor.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear Lara Arnold, I first have to ask you about that you agree to the principle of scientific integrity. The text is as follows. Do you promise to work in accordance with the principles of science and scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
I promise.
Okay. By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present online, I hereby confer upon you, Laura Arnold, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, you will soon receive the degree certificate sent by the rector, the secretary, and the supervisors affixed with official seal of the university, shown now by the beetle.
Congratulations and applause. If everyone is muted, the applause is very silent, but it's well meant overall. Please continue, Professor Brandt.
Okay, I will now hold the laudatio. Congratulations, Dr. Arnold. Also on behalf of your co-supervisor, Timo Clemens, a warm welcome to the doctoral family at Maastricht University and INTHELS. After completing your bachelor's degree in social work, you went on to earn a master degree in health promotion and a master degree in epidemiology, a solid academic background. You have worked at various universities and the Academy for Public Health Services in Germany. This is all in all an excellent training in public services. You are now employed at the State Institute for Health in Bavaria. So you are familiar with both the academic world and the public sector. You have experience really in these two worlds. This is important if you want to understand the problems involved in implementation and transfer of evidence into practice. And since 2021, you have been working on your PhD at Maastricht University's Department of International Health with us. You chose the topic of evidence based on your experience with the COVID pandemic, which clearly showed that there's a lack of knowledge about how evidence can be incorporated into health policy at the local level. You used the research funds that were made available to public health services for improvement after the pandemic. A very clever idea. In doing so, you addressed a truly topical issue. The results of your work are eagerly awaited by the public health services and further around, as we have seen in the discussion just now. Incidentally, it is rare for study results to be taken up so quickly. Let's hope that the momentum can be maintained, as other major issues in society are now competing for public interest and also for public funds. And we even might face a new time of austerity. My personal guess is that there will be consolidation, but no further expansion of the local public health services sector in Germany. And we will see that the state level will gain momentum to become a kind of service provider for the local level. A problem may be unique to one district, but it occurs more frequently at the state level. This builds experiences and expertise for consulting. I have not discussed this with Christoph Elutis before, as he has mentioned something similar as a question in the defense Rhine coincidence. Now that you have moved to precisely this level, the state level, and the right institutions, you can continue your research agenda. You have always worked a little harder than necessary. You have, as we say in Maastricht often, gone the extra mile. Sometimes it was difficult to keep up with the new versions of your articles that you wanted to publish. They were just pouring in. So version numbering was essential. And sometimes there was a bit too much German over-engineering. But that's a good thing. It's much easier to shorten something than to expand it. It has always been very pleasant to work with you. And I guess Timo will confirm this. Since you are already a professional, and we like to work with professionals as doctoral students, the discussions about your research have always been on a high standard. And I must admit that they were a little bit challenging sometimes, as you raised some methodological questions that even I had to think about twice at least. By the way, you are also a European, a German living in Austria and doing a PhD in the Netherlands. That is what we want for European public health. And let's not forget, the Schengen Agreement is now 40 years old and has been in force for 30 years. It is only because of this that it is so easy to travel and work between the different European countries. We all hope that you will have fond memories of Maastricht University, as you are now one of our goodwill ambassadors. And once again, welcome to the doctoral family. Congratulations.
Thank you,
I
Professor.
hand back to the proect.
Thank you, Professor Brandt, and congratulations with your laudatio. As we are in this sterile online environment, I wanted to close this session with giving the opportunity to people who want to congratulate Dr. Arnold. Dr. Clemens, do you want to interact with the new fresh doctor and congratulate her?
Laura, my congratulations to this achievements. It's well deserved. I will certainly miss the discussions on German public health service, methodological approaches, participatory action research that Helmut was referring to. And I hope there is a possibility to interact, even if the distance now to Bavaria has, I guess, tripled, maybe extended by 5 times compared to Düsseldorf. So I wish you all the best for your career and hope to be interacting with you in the future and continue to work. All the best. Celebrate today.
Professor Starke? Only if you want, huh?
Liebe Laura, congratulations. I missed the discussion with you every day. And although I'm happy that you found a new place in Munich, I think it would have been nice to continue discussions more frequently. And as Timo said, I hope there will be opportunity to do this. I'm really proud of what you achieved, and Helmut said it really, it was really right to describe your way of working. It's always an extra mile, an extra hour, and extra discussion and some questions that are sometimes difficult to respond to. But I think you did great work, and I hope you have a wonderful day today and celebrate it. And I hope to hear from you soon.
Professor Chavanowska.
Dear Laura, I'm very, very proud of your work, and I'm happy that I was on the assessment committee. Congratulations. It is very much in line with my research, and I think it nicely contributes to the achievements of the Department of International Health, as it meets the criteria for what we are doing. So congratulations, and I hope for your very good career and a lot of opportunities on your way.
Professor Jansen.
Dear Laura, very, very important what you have done. And I'm very proud of you because you are more or less the first pioneer in Germany that tried to bridge the gap between practice and academia. I tried to do that in the Netherlands, and well, I can say that it takes a lot of time, but finally, in the end, it will be successful. I wish you all the best for the rest of your career.
Thank you. Professor Bruskill.
Yeah, liebe Laura, congratulations, and thank you that you choose me to be on this committee. And I've really enjoyed your work, and I already took it back to Brandenburg, of course, and I'm very much looking forward to working with you in the future. Have a very good day.
Thank you. Professor Reefus.
Liebe Laura, my heartfelt congratulations to you. It's been a pleasure to be part of this ceremony today, to have been part of your assessment committee. And I'm the lucky one, being based in Munich, and we even share a roof, the roof of the Pettenkofer School of Public Health, to hopefully get a chance to be working much more with you over the coming months and years. But we'll use that to build bridges to Düsseldorf and to Maastricht and to Brandenburg and everywhere else. So enjoy the day, celebrate, and be proud of yourself.
Thank you very much. Dr. Alutis.
Yes, thank you. Please also build a bridge to Cologne. Congratulations from my end. We have not yet met in person, but I've actually read a lot about a lot from you even before this dissertation. So I'm happy to meet at least virtually now here. And yeah, our work is also intertwined. For instance, in the Kooperationsverbund Gesundheitliche Chancengleichheit. So I'm happy that we meet face to face here now virtually, and I'm sure we will be in touch. I wish you all the best. Congratulations again. Have a great day and a good celebration now.
Yeah, Dr. Arnold, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I congratulate with the degree you have acquired. And I hereby declare this ceremony ended.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and have a very nice celebration today.
You will celebrate, I hope.